Well, President Donald Trump wasted no time making headlines on his very first day back in office, signing an executive order that has now sparked international debate. The order, titled Defending Women from Gender Ideology, Extremism and Restoring a Biological Truth to the federal government, eliminates key anti-discrimination protections for the transgender and non-binary individuals. It also mandates changes to federal identification policies, aligning them with what the administration calls biological reality. And to further unpack this, let's welcome Neela Ghoshal, who's a Senior Director of Law Policy and Research at Outright International, and she's joining us live from Washington, D.C. Neela, thank you so much for your time. Great having you on the show. So what are your views on Trump's very controversial executive order rescinding transgender and non-binary rights to Americans?
Thank you so much for having me. Well, first, let me start with what you just said, that Trump started out his first day in office by making headlines. This is precisely what this is about. It's about making headlines. It's about moral scapegoating, and it's about the politics of exclusion. And it is not about doing anything for the American people. It is certainly not about defending women. And I have to laugh a little bit at the irony in this title, Defending Women from Gender Ideology Extremism. We all know that Donald Trump is the last person in the world who can claim to defend women. In fact, he is a serial sexual predator, and that should not be forgotten. Now, what this order is about trying to stir up popular support by going after a constructed enemy, which is the trans, intersex, and non-binary community in the United States. So the executive order essentially invisibilizes trans, non-binary, and intersex people, says that they don't exist, and strips them of their rights, particularly of the right to autonomy and self-identification. Trans people, intersex people, non-binary people are going to continue to exist. They've existed throughout centuries, throughout millennia, and pretending that they don't exist by redefining sex as simply meaning men and women isn't going to make them disappear. It's just going to make their lives more precarious and marginal. We know that when people are not able to access identity documents that reflect their gender expression, they are exposed to violence, humiliation, discrimination, and stigma. Every time they have to go get health care, when they have to go to the bank, when they have to rent an apartment, when they have to cross a border at an airport, if your identity document doesn't reflect who you are, you can be turned away from services, discriminated against, and in the worst cases, even subjected to physical violence and killed. This is something that happens to trans people. It's a reality, and Trump is throwing them under the bus simply to gain popular support, not to address any real problem that exists. And that's the politics we can expect to see for the next 4 years in the United States.
Neela, is this in any way a direct human right violation against the transgender non-binary people of America?
Absolutely, and let's not forget intersex people as well. The executive order says that sex is binary, that it's male and female, and intersex people, who make up about 1.7% of the world population, have bodily autonomy that does not fit neatly into the definition of male or female. And so saying that a group of people doesn't exist is one of the most fundamental ways to violate their human rights. There have been a number of interpretations, including by United Nations entities, as well as by the previous U.S. government, international regional courts, and other entities, that have determined that when people are unable to access identity documents that reflect their identity, they are subjected to the violation of the freedom of movement. They're subjected to the violation of the freedom of self-determination. And of course, this also greatly increases the risk of discrimination, as I said. So yeah, in fact, I would view this as a policy that fundamentally violates the human rights of trans, intersex, and non-binary people. And it does not protect women's rights, which is the pretense here. So, there's no way in which this executive order is going to make the world safer for women.
And Neela, this is actually how it's been framed, and I suppose, to a large extent, confusing a lot of people, because this is, of course, not something that we are actually unfamiliar with here in the continent, as a number of countries have also taken a similar route, or even totally banning same-sex marriages or any openly LGBTQ activities. Their reasons being the preservation of our family structures and ensuring generational reproduction. And in the States, it's much more about the right for children having the right, we are being told, to be old enough to make a decision to choose if they want a gender reassignment, right? And the growing issue also that you've mentioned and touched on of trans women dominating women's sports. So what do you think then would be a unilateral and non-discriminatory approach to this matter?
Actually, I think that you're putting words into my mouth. I don't think I said anything about trans women dominating women's sports, and I don't think that that's factual. So I would fact check yourself a little bit on that. Women's sports struggle because the United States does not sufficiently fund women's sports, and because of cisgender heterosexual male sexual predators that harass and routinely assault women in women's sports. So let's talk about what the real problems are, and let's talk about the evidence. So what we know, let's talk about evidence. Trans women are routinely subjected to violence. They are subjected to violence in restrooms. They are subjected to violence in the street. They are subjected to violence in schools. Young children who identify as trans are bullied and in some cases resort to suicide in their teenage years. This has been sufficiently documented in South Africa and elsewhere. And I think you're aware of a number of cases in the news of trans children in South Africa attempting or committing suicide. This is a public health crisis. This is a human rights crisis. So the way we address it is to make sure that everybody feels included in our societies. And that includes the most marginalized people, trans, non-binary, and intersex people. Now, when a person is born, they are assigned a gender identity. So they don't have a choice. I was assigned F when I was born for female. That's not my choice. That might or might not be how I identify. Now, as I grow up, if I identify differently, that should be respected. It's that simple.
Absolutely.
Respect who somebody says that they are.
Neela,
and ensure that their rights are upheld and respected.
Absolutely. Neela, I think you misunderstood me there. I was saying we're being sold the idea, this side, which is confusing people, that the reason why these orders were actually executed is to protect against the domination of males or transgenders in the field of women in sports. So I think we lost each other there. But thank you so much, Neela, for your contribution this afternoon. That is Neela Ghoshal there. She's the Director of Law and Policy at Outright International on Trump's executive order on transgender rights.